Hi everyone, thank you for clicking and welcome to a run through of the men's race in Ironman 70.3 Memphis. The season is starting to wind down a little, but we still had a decent start list. Ben Hoffman coming off of a third at Ironman Chattanooga last weekend, Bradley Weiss and George Goodwin, who'd both be looking to make amends after disappointing results at 70.3 Worlds, as well as Jason West, Tim Reed, Andre Lopez and Danilo Pimentel, who all raced 70.3 Augusta last weekend. So a solid field, but also some very tired legs out there. Sam Appleton and Felipe Azevedo were both on the start list, but presumably content with their recent race results, they decided to have a weekend off. After a short delay due to some very English weather in Memphis, the non-wetsuit swim got underway. Mark Dubrick of the USA, who has a mainly ITU background but also a 70.3 podium to his name, established himself as the early leader. Nobody fancied jumping on Dubrick's feet, who steadily opened up a gap, looking pretty comfortable and controlled in the water. The bulk of the field settled in behind in a large chase pack with a few isolated athletes off the back. Dubrick led out of the water in a time of 24:30 with a minute lead over the main chase pack of 10 that contained Hoffman, Weiss, Reed and West. George Goodwin, who must have swam a large portion of the course all alone, came into T1 3:20 down on Dubrick with nobody really near him to work with on the bike. And this is very much the difficulty of these smaller races. When we've seen George Goodwin produce excellent results, he's exited the water with or ahead of some very strong athletes, who he has then been able to work with to get back to the front. However, here in a less deep field, he's very much isolated with every single other favourite up the road. The rain is coming down hard and the course is starting to look rather slippery. Dubrick keeps it steady for the initial stages of the bike, no doubt aware that there is a strong group chasing him down. And around 30 minutes into the bike, Dubrick is absorbed into the pace line as the catch is made. This group of 10 rolls through the first time check at 32k together. Goodwin has reduced his gap to the front by 30 seconds, but he's actually ridden slower than the main pack since they've closed their full minute deficit. So in actual fact, the main pack is riding away from him still. Around the 40k mark, we start to see a few attempts to shake things up. Hoffman goes off the front first and is shortly joined by Weiss. Coming off of a full Ironman last weekend, you get the feeling that Hoffman is going to need to take a gap onto the run, or at the very least thin out this group to have a good shot at a high place finish. Although it's Hoffman that initiates a shake-up, it's Weiss who makes the best go of it. He gets a 20-second gap halfway through the bike, but Andre Lopez of Brazil, who, to the delight of everyone else in this pace line I'm sure, does a very good job of not letting Weiss disappear up the road. Lopez and Hoffman alternate turns on the front, and Weiss is brought back, who accepts that he's had his fun for the bike and slots back in. Once this catch is made, the pace of this lead group clearly slows up, and Goodwin, who had fallen to 4 minutes down at the 50k mark, is beginning to be let back in 3 minutes down with 20k left on the bike. With the main pack still altogether at 70k, it creates an interesting dilemma for a few of these athletes. As mentioned at the beginning, a lot of these guys raced 70.3 Augusta last weekend, where they were convincingly outrun by Jason West, who finished second with a 1:09 run split, 5 minutes faster than Reed, Lopez and Pimentel. However, up until this point, West has been sat very quietly in this group, whilst Lopez and Reed have both put their face in the wind at the front on the bike at various points. With 9 still in this group, it's perhaps slightly too big to coordinate a move that would put West under pressure, but so far it seems that everyone's tactic is just to hope that West has gotten 5 minutes slower over the last week. Just as it looks like we've got a boring 20k of everyone accepting it is going to come down to the run though, is big Ben Hoffman, who jumps on the opportunity and puts in a surge. Weiss can't resist either and follows shortly after. Both gap the group, but it's Andre Lopez again who's doing the work to close these two down. I appreciate that triathlon isn't quite at the stage that cycling is in terms of tactics and race dynamics, and technically this is still a non-drafting race, but having already done a lot of work on the front, Lopez either needs to try and go with Hoffman and Weiss, or just relax and put the onus on somebody else in this group, preferably Jason West. Hoffman is rewarded with a 1 minute gap into T2 and Weiss with 30 seconds. The main group come in all together and Goodwin is only 2:10 down on them at this point. West and Dubrick come flying out of transition at 3:10 per kilometre pace and catch up Weiss and then Hoffman after just 2k. I must admit, when I saw this I was rubbing my hands together thinking we were going to see some catastrophic blow-ups later in the race, but to be fair to these two, they kept it going very well. By 5k the order was very much established. West ran 15:50 with Dubrick 8 seconds back, Weiss 40 seconds back, the two Brazilians Lopez and Pimentel 1:30 back, whilst Marty Andre, Hoffman and Reed were all in the region of 2 minutes down. Goodwin's struggles continued, having failed to make back any time and was now over 5 minutes back. Dubrick was slowly starting to pay for trying to stick with West on the early stages of the run and was being chased down by a very strong looking Bradley Weiss. By 10k only 17 seconds separated them, and at 12k Weiss made a pretty emphatic move, not giving Dubrick a moment to even consider trying to stick with him. Around the 16k mark, West was still looking very strong despite this being his third race in 3 weeks. Similarly for Weiss, who was holding his form and his gap to West at 1 minute 30, whilst Dubrick, despite looking ropey compared to the front two, was keeping his podium spot well guarded. Behind these three, Lopez breaks Pimentel, having run the last 16k together, and moves into 4th by 30 seconds. And from here, this is largely how it remained. West put in another very impressive 1:09 half marathon to take the win, Weiss in 2nd and Dubrick in 3rd. Lopez in 4th, whilst Marty Andrew had a very solid finish to catch Pimentel in the home straight, finishing 5th and 6th. Reed in 7th, Hoffman 8th, Back 9th and Goodwin 10th. A pretty good showing for an end-of-season race, and also a chance to see some athletes who would otherwise be in the very large shadows of your Lionel Sanders and Sam Longs. As always, thank you very much for watching, and also for all of the nice comments you've left on the Chattanooga video last weekend. They're really motivating to read, and the feedback is always appreciated.